Pro Football Focus has started ranking position rooms across the NFL, and they started with the skill group. So we're going to see where the Dolphins rank on these lists, and if I agree here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, the author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Welcome to aggregation season, right? We still have Jalen Ramsey watch. We still have Jonnu Smith watch. But, man, I'm really desperate to talk about something that's not an angle around one of these two storylines around this football team. So, mercifully, we've gotten over the last couple of days this week a couple of curated lists that I want to look at courtesy of Pro Football Focus. And it's not just individual players. It's the entirety of the room. And that's the objective today is to look at the running back group that the Dolphins have and how that ranks against the entirety of running back rooms across the NFL. And the same thing for the receiving core. I believe tight ends are rolled into that as a part of that conversation, which we'll get into a little bit later on the show. ESPN dropped an all-quarter century team, which is pretty sparingly light on Dolphins. And we do have an Adam Schefter, Jalen Ramsey talking about. We'll get into it at the very end of the show. But let's talk about something that's not Miami's maligned former all-pro cornerback. And let's talk about the list that was put up by Pro Football Focus with the running back room rankings across the NFL. I was surprised to find out where the Dolphins ranked on this list, and surprised not necessarily in a good way. They end up ranking 18th, which is the bottom half of the league running back room. And I get it. You don't really have a lot of proof of concept with Ollie Gordon, who's a rookie as a 6th-round draft choice, and Jaylen Wright, who was a 4th-round draft choice, that I think 2/3 of his last 15 runs that he had last season went for negative yards. Some of that because of Jaylen and how he read stuff, but also a lot of it having to do with the blocking scheme. And the last carry that he had last year was a 9-yard loss that was kind of just a total misidentification of emotion and how the second level bumped and who you're blocking and the misdirection there. You ended up leaving the edge unblocked, and he runs upfield and makes a tackle. And there's not a lot of guy like Jaylen Wright can do on any running back can do on plays like that. So I understand you look at the room, and Alexander Madison's not a really attractive name because you generally know what he is. If you need 2 yards, he's going to get you 2.2. He's going to get what's blocked available to him. He falls forward at contact. But explosive plays aren't really his thing. He's not a high-yield efficiency player at the position. Devon Achane, very dynamic player, was the guy for the Dolphins last year. But beyond that, you have questions. It was some of the teams in front that surprised me just as much because I think you can make a case for Houston with Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb being brought into the mix, even in a late-stage career for both of those guys. And then Dameon Pierce is a guy who's a little bit more proven than the guys that the Dolphins have as depth guys. You say that back room is better than Miami's, but they checked in 19th. Whereas the Jets ranked 17th on this list. And I'm not going to give the whole list because I want to be respectful of, it's their content. If you want to see the full list, go to PFF.com and read the full list. But it's the general tier that the Dolphins are in and the order within that surprised me the most. I was very surprised to see the Washington Commanders ranked 14th on this list, 4 spots in front of the Dolphins. That, to me, Brian Robinson Jr. has been a sufficient kind of player, but not a very dynamic player at the position. Austin Eckler is a late-stage career player that beyond the receiving game profile, you don't see a lot of excitement for. I'd put the Dolphins running back room right now with just Devon Achane as the proven asset commodity in the room. I would put it in front of Washington's because, yeah, they have Brian Robinson Jr. as a low-ceiling player that's a little bit more established, and then Austin Eckler, but it's late-stage career Austin Eckler. Now, I'd probably put the Texans room in front of Miami's, so you start shuffling within the tier, and maybe it's not going to get so far up. I'd put it in front of the Jets right now, where Breece Hall continues to be, and the Jets rank 17th. The Jets have Braylon Allen as the second-year player. They have Isaiah Davis as a second-year player, and they have Breece Hall. I think Achane has established more as an NFL player than Breece Hall has, personally. And names like Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis, they got some flashes, but Isaiah Davis had less than 3 dozen carries last year, right? Like, those are not proven commodities any more than Jalen Wright is. So, for me, I'll take the more proven commodity if beyond the top asset is all questions. I'd put the Dolphins in front of them. I would certainly put, if you got to weigh it based on the top guy too, right? Like, your third guy in the queue can't be worth equal value as the first guy in your queue. So for the Colts, they rank 16th on this list. For me, they'd be way up. And I know Jonathan Taylor hasn't been the best version of himself, but Jonathan Taylor and the Colts, I'd put him in front of the Chargers at 15. It's on this list. Washington at 14. The Raiders at 13. I'd certainly put the Colts as a top 12 room when you consider they added Khalil Herbert as a player that has a proven role to play, and then Jonathan Taylor, when healthy, is one of the 5 best running backs in football. So all things considered, I think it's fair to look at the Dolphins group and put them in the block in the middle of the pack. And if you're going to sit here and you're going to nitpick as far as how the order shakes out, I think there is some moving and shaking that can be done. For me, they'd probably be 15, 16 in that ballpark. There's a couple of teams, Washington. I'd probably put the Chargers behind him as well. I'd put the Jets behind him. But I'd put the Texans in front of them. So you're probably talking 16 is where I'd put the Dolphins right now. My bold prediction out of this is you're going to look at this group next year, and it will be higher than 16. They have enough assets in the room, and Devon Achane continuing to mature and develop his game and hopefully finding the right usages for him and an improved blocking cast of interior players in front of him. Now, you may be downgraded at tackle from, well, you definitely downgraded at tackle. I don't want to get accused of any copium or hopium here. You definitely downgraded at left tackle from Teron to Patrick Paul, but do you get 17 games of Patrick Paul? Do you get 17 games of Austin Jackson versus 9 games of Austin Jackson and 8 games of Kendall Lamb? I think you can have a better tackle total product than what you've had in the last couple of years when you consider missed time for some guys if you can get some darn stability in the room. But I definitely think the interior will be better because it's been a point of emphasis in the different body types that they bring. And I think that, in turn, can help you diversify your run game. And if you have a more diversified run game, it should give you more balance in how you run the football. And these guys will showcase well. So I think they will be ranked higher than 16th next year when this list comes out. But as of right now, Pro Football Focus's list ranks them at 18. Now, we're going to get into the pass-catching group. That is next here for us on Locked on Dolphins, so make sure that you guys stick with us. NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances. Major momentum shifts, can't miss moments, whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player. There's never been a better time to get in on the action than right now, especially because we get Game 7, right? It's it's 10 years since we've seen a Game 7 in the NBA, so you get a chance for one more go with basketball, and the Major League Baseball season is heating up, and every game also brings clutch hits, standout pitching, unforgettable moments. So FanDuel makes it easy for you, regardless of what sport it is, to stay in the game before tip-off for first pitch. With player props, performance trends, same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and to win big. And if you like free money, you can get $200 in bonus bets to add to the excitement if your first $5 bet with FanDuel wins. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place that first $5 bet, and if it wins, you will get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. So let's talk pass catchers here. Excuse my fat fingers if you're watching on YouTube. The Dolphins rank 7th in pass catchers. So this does include tight ends. It includes backs as well. So the entire body of work of supporting cast in the passing game. Obviously, you have Tyreek Hill. You have Jalen Waddle. You have Jonnu Smith with his 111 targets that we talked about at length yesterday on the show. You have Devon Achane, who we just got done talking about. I think he's one of the best pass-catching backs in football. Would love to see, I know I've made the analogy a couple of times, but if you're not an everydayer, first of all, shame on you. Your team every day. Hit subscribe. But I think Devon Achane's perfect role that I aspire to see the Dolphins find for him is the Alvin Kamara type of usage. And if you can get that and really amplify the passing game and then get the speed and explosive play, but then have somebody else as a part of your stable, I think you're going to get a more efficient per-touch version of Devon Achane. But his asset as a pass-catching player out of the backfield is undeniably, I think, one of the best parts of his game. And then Jonnu Smith, obviously the dump and run opportunities that he has, and I think there's room for him to be better there. His coach, John Embry, thinks there's room for him to be better there. But the explosive play element that he has for creating missed tackles or broken tackle angles in space and on the second level, plus Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, it's a really strong group. Now, I don't think you'd be surprised to find out that the Eagles, with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley and Jahan Dotson as a former first-round pick as the number 3 wide receiver, that's their top team here. I will do the top 8 here. Tampa Bay sits at number 2, probably the best 1 through 4 wide receiver room in the NFL. They drafted Emeka Egbuka in the first round to go with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, who they bought back in free agency. Jalen McMillan looks like a hit from them as a mid-round draft choice from last year's NFL draft. Bucky Irving and Rashad White as the backs out of the backfield. And I was a huge fan of Bucky Irving, was fired up to see him have as productive as a season as he had. That's a very robust group. Cincinnati, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown as an emerging player, Mike Gesicki, perfect kind of offense for him because those. Here's the thing with Mike that I think works in Cincinnati that I don't think really worked in Miami. Mike's best running the seam, and he's best running those special routes and those deep crosses across the middle of the field. When you have players like Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, who also thrive and your passing attack is a volume middle of the field passing attack, you have so much more explosive play potential when it's those guys over Mike. That overlap creates conflict. And then that's before you get into the blocking elements of Mike as a player and how it fits within what the Dolphins want to be running the football as a balanced offense. Cincinnati, they don't care about running the ball. Right? Like they're a team that lives in spreading the field, 5-man protections, and they got guys in Chase and Higgins as big-bodied outside guys that you could throw with timing. You could play down the field. You could play at the catch point and throw chemistry balls and back shoulder throws too. And it opens up more of the middle of the field, especially once Tyler Boyd left, for Mike Gesicki to be that kind of guy for them. He had one, according to Pro Football Focus, over 1.5 yards per route run, which was the best average he had in a single season since 2020. Yeah, I mean, it's the right kind of implementation with the right players around. So good for Mike to find that role for himself. But Cincinnati's supporting cast is Chase, Higgins, Brown, and Gesicki. Now, if you hold Miami's group up against that, Chase is obviously the best player, right? And Tyreek Hill had something to say about that, and then last year happened, and how much of that form you get back, we'll see. But right now, it's Chase. I think Waddle, predictively, you try to project moving forward, I think Waddle has a chance to be the 1A in Miami, and I'd like to see him be the 1A. We did that show, 2 weeks ago? And looked at the man coverage splits and looked at the first read splits and the efficiency splits for those guys. I think Waddle is ready to take that next step, and I hope they give him that chance and they don't just say, well, Tyreek's back and we're paying Tyreek all the coins, so he's got to get the ball 170 times again. I think that would be to the detriment of the offense. But I would put the two Miami receivers in between Chase and Higgins, right? And then I think Chase Brown is probably a more well-balanced runner, but Achane, I think, is a better receiver, and this is through the lens of a passing game. And then I would take Jonnu Smith because he has more missed tackle and straight-line speed ability than Mike Gesicki does. So if you're looking at that, and Nick Westbrook-Ikine was a more productive player, I think the Dolphins have a reasonable chance to be in the conversation. It just depends on how much separation to keep the same energy as we just had with the wide receiver or with the running back conversation. Although it is a little different because you have more players that are the marquee players when you're looking at an entire passing group. If Chase being the best player carries that much weight for you and you put them this far in front of Miami on the list, by all means. I can't argue with you too much, but I think Miami, that's the first stop where I think there's an interesting conversation. Because Philly's loaded across the board. Tampa's embarrassment of riches at wide receiver, plus I think they have a deeper running back room in totality, and that includes guys that can catch the football. Cincinnati's the first one I look at, and I think it gets interesting. Now, Detroit at 4. The names that are mentioned here, Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously one of the best all-around receivers in the game, got that dog in him. Jamison Williams, who had a 1,000-yard breakout despite being a low-volume player. He's that traditional speed Z who runs the stuff that lifts the coverage. Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. I would say Amon-Ra St. Brown, with less separation, is better than what we saw from Miami's receivers last year. So I think they get the edge there. In the same light, I would take Miami's 10-17, and I would put them in front of Jamison Williams, and there's a pretty healthy gap there in my mind. I think Sam Laporta is a better all-around tight end. Is he a better pass catcher? Probably. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, is also in front. So I would actually have Detroit in front of Cincinnati, personally, based off the depth of the group. And I think Detroit has a better argument to stay in front of Miami than what the Dolphins do. Now, we have a couple of the teams that we're going to get into here on the show, and then talk quickly about Schefter's update and the All-Century team that is coming your way next here on Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. The two remaining teams that sit in front of the Dolphins here, San Francisco at 5, which for me, Brandon Ayuk's coming off an ACL. Christian McCaffrey, we hardly saw last year with his Achilles issues. Deebo Samuel's gone and traded. George Kittle, I think at this point, is their most reliable to forecast passing game weapon. Now, if Ayuk's healthy, he's a monster. If McCaffrey's healthy, he's a monster. If Ricky Pearsall ends up being the player that I liked him as in the pre-draft process, and you didn't really see that last year. But it's a rookie, so and he was behind a lot of guys in that room last year, including Juwan Jennings, who's a great role player. I think San Francisco, when healthy, should be in front of the Dolphins. Are they healthy? I don't know. So I think that them in Cincinnati, when you look at the entirety of the pass rushing room for wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs all collectively, I think they're a high variance one for me that's a little hard to peg. There's one more team, the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota with Justin Jefferson is the best receiver in football for my money. Doesn't matter who's throwing them the ball. But then you look at the rest of what they have with Jordan Addison as a first-round draft choice, TJ Hawkinson, who they gave a lot of assets to, and now he's healthy. Aaron Jones continuing to produce at a high level. And then they add Jordan Mason, who is a restricted free agent out of San Francisco, was one of the guys who stepped up when McCaffrey was out. He's now kind of the RB2 there in Minnesota. Ty Felton in the draft, Rondale Moore. I think they have a better overall receiver. I think they have a better overall running back, and I think they have a better overall tight end as the top tight end. So I have no problem with Minnesota staying in front of Miami. Could Miami pass them? Perhaps, right? I think it depends on what version of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle you get. You get those guys both putting up 1,300 yards again and going for 3,000 combined yards like they did in 22, I'd probably put Miami in front of them. But as of right now, based off of where we are at this point in time and what we know, I don't take a lot of exception to that. So I think Miami has a fringe argument to be a top 5 skill group as a whole right now from a passing game weapons standpoint. I think their best arguments are with Cincinnati, but Chase's wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 in the entirety of the NFL. And if that difference matters to you, then go ahead. And then San Francisco from a health perspective. The team that's nipping on the Dolphins' heels at number 8 is the LA Rams. I think they need another emergence from another player as a passing game weapon to get into this conversation because it's Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams having moved on from Cooper Kupp. But their backs aren't as productive in the passing game as what Miami has. Their tight ends aren't as productive. Tutu Atwell, you were just happy to see a pulse from. So that's a team I think has the potential to leap like Miami into that top 5, top 6 conversation, but I'm fine with them where they're at right now. So Miami reasonably represented in the running back room and well represented despite the questions in the passing game. And I think that's helpful to look across the league and kind of contextualize these problems and conversations we've been so individually isolated in because we're focused on the Dolphins. Right? Every once in a while you look across the landscape and it changes the perspective for better or for worse. Right? ESPN put out an all-century team, and the Dolphins were not well represented on the all-quarter century team. It was Calais Campbell was the only player that had any time with the Dolphins who appeared on the list. I think the thing that I don't have a lot of arguments, really. Like if you wanted to put Jalen Ramsey on it, okay. I mean, there's been a lot of great corners that have come through. But I think that's one of the things that's apparent to me when I look at the last 2 decades, really, since Dan Marino retired, right? You've got some Hall of Fame players. I think Jason Taylor is a conversation to be on that list, but there's players that have been equally productive and played on better teams. And when you do an exercise like that, like it or not, that gets factored into the conversation. Zach Thomas is a Hall of Famer, right? So you got Zach and JT, and those guys were elite players in their eras and had longevity on their side as well. But they didn't have the relevance, and I think part of that hurt them. But when I look at the Dolphins and representation on other teams as a whole, there's guys who didn't just play on elite teams all the time, and I think that's been part of the missing formula for Miami has been having a sustained elite talent or elite talents. Now, you have some cornerstones. You've had some elite production. You have this stop with Tyreek Hill, and maybe you get to 2050 and Tyreek Hill's on the list, and you'd say, well, the Dolphins had a player there. We'll do the follow-up show in 25 years and see what the numbers are. But I think that underscores part of the challenge that the Dolphins have been having to live with, is all these great teams that have sustained extended windows of competitiveness have 3, 4, 5 star marquee players on their rosters. So from that sense, I kind of appreciate what the Dolphins have tried to do with this build, with the transition that's now underway, because you reached the end of the road, I think, with your optimized window to spend and pour actively into just this iteration of the build and not think about future years. But it obviously didn't come to pass and materialize in the way that you wanted it to. So the challenge for Miami is, as I reflect on that and I look at where this team is at right now, I say we need to identify who those next pieces are. Who is the best chance to be that kind of tone-setting elite player for an extended window? Is it Chop? Is it Kenneth Grant? Is it Jalen Waddle? Is it Tua Tagovailoa? Is it Devon Achane? Is it Jordan Brooks? Who are the guys that have the best chance to be that? Because they're really the anchors in which your build is centered around. So it was just a big picture thought that I had. Adam Schefter did hop on Pat McAfee and shared that Jalen Ramsey, the Dolphins continue to have conversations. He expects Ramsey will get traded before training camp starts, and that Ramsey would prefer to go to the West Coast with one of the Los Angeles teams. And that's not a surprise. He's out there working at the UCLA Wasserman Complex and stopped by USC to see Eric Weddle and his son. And he's out there, right? And it's just going to continue to fuel that until he finds that destination. There's rumors online. I try not to be a rumor mill hotspot, but there's been a little bit of buzz about potentially Pittsburgh. Is Miami leveraging Pittsburgh to try to get the Rams or one of these other West Coast teams to come up? Is Pittsburgh invested in giving a pick without charging too much money to offset it? Schefter said it could get done next week. He doesn't know when it's going to get done, but he expects it to be done at this point in time before training camp. Let me make sure that that's the worst thing is if it's a news story like that, I would hate for it to be happening and my phone's popping off with a couple notifications. And I finish saying it and then go produce it and the news comes out. That's going to do it for us here today on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. You can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. Your team every day. Make it a great rest of your day. Fins up. I'm out of here. Enjoy your weekend. Talk to you all again soon.